When I finished university, I already had a job lined up. It was in a state I'd never been to before and in a city I'd never heard of before. I ended up renting a room from a guy who eventually turned out to be one of my closest friends. He looked out for me. He made me feel welcome in a new city. And he introduced me to people and to opportunities that really enriched my experience during the time I was there. He was great to me and we became fast friends. We stayed friends, even till this day we're good friends. What I really admire about this guy is his ability to always find the go button. I don't mean the start button. I mean the go button. Go comes after start. You see, I know you can start when you've got enthusiasm, but can't you go after you've lost it? You can start when your friends are with you, when people believe in you, but can't you go when your phone stops ringing? Can you go when the people you're doing this for stop believing in you? I know you can start when you have the money, but can't you go when it runs out? My friend's name is Tony, and he taught me about the go button. While we were living together, I took a weekend trip. I left on a Friday and I was back that Sunday. I walked in the door expecting him to be saying, "Hey, Gabe," but there was nothing. And the house was unusually quiet for a Sunday. I didn't think much of it. I went upstairs to unpack, and as I was unpacking, I thought I had seen a plate of food downstairs on the table. I remember thinking how strange it was. Why would there be a plate of food on the table if Tony wasn't home? I went back downstairs, and there was a plate of food, and still no Tony. This is where the detective hat comes on, because I went around the house looking for clues, and still no Tony. I had already called him, no response, so I decided to call a friend of his. Here's what went down. In the middle of eating lunch, there was a knock on the door. Tony gets up, opens the door, and it's the immigration cops. They asked to see his identification, and before he knew it, he's hauled off. They stuck him in the back of a van, and that was it. They gave him just enough time to get an item of clothing, and he was gone off to a detention center somewhere. I stood in the kitchen trying to process what I was hearing. When the call ended, I put the phone down and sort of aimlessly stared around the room, wondering at how quickly life can change. I mean, here's a guy who had everything going for him. His own house, a good job, great friends, and a massive potential. And just like that, it was all gone. His entire universe just got flipped on its head. It's hard to describe what it felt like just standing there in Tony's house, knowing that the world he woke up to a few hours ago was gone. About a week later, I visited Tony at the detention center where he was being held. Well, it was a jail, really. When they brought him out, he was in orange. He was standing there in an orange jumpsuit and behind glass. It would have been one thing if this guy had been like some of the kids I grew up with, the knuckleheads and roughnecks, the gun carriers, gangsters, and dealers. I expected those guys to end up here, dressed in orange and behind glass. Not Tony. Not Tony. Tony was sitting in jail because of unprocessed paperwork. We talked about it, and when I left, I remember being in the car thinking about something he had said. He said, referring to jail, that there's no peace in this place. He was there for 3 months, but for somebody who has no business in jail, it may as well have been 3 years. I was talking to Tony last week, and for some reason we ended up talking about his time in jail. He described how difficult it was for him to have everything he'd built taken away from him, and the only thing left in his future was uncertainty. He told me how difficult it was to wake up every day in a box. And as a mental exercise, he would imagine himself outside just cutting the grass. He told me how his mind would play tricks on him. It was hard. And what I realized was that peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the abundance of balance. Because what he told me next was inspiring. Yes, it was hard. Yes, it was difficult, but he told me that he had to make an active decision to remember who he was. There was no peace in that jail, just conflict. But he couldn't wait around for peace before he decided to remember who he was. He'd always been creative. He'd always been a winner. And when he remembered that about himself, things began to change. He found a way to be effective. He found a way to create value, productive value for the people around him and for the jail itself. The day he walked out of that jail, they put a check in his hand for services rendered. Are you waiting for peace to arrive before you remember who you are? Are you praying for the conflicts in your life to end before you remember who you are? Is that what you're waiting for? Maybe it's time to re-examine your definition of peace. Peace is about balance. The balance you create between the conflict of your life and the prospects for your ideal life. The go button is always there. You simply have to decide to press it. My name is Angelo, and I'm the Motivator.